Alrighty. Well, um, yeah, I've been watching some stories, some news stuff about Canada. I really need to stop doing that because it's just horrible. Oh, anyway, Canada has gotten into persecuting Christians. This is a thing now. We're going to persecute the Christians. Well, the Christian Bible says you can't celebrate the LGBTQ. Because the things that they do with each other are abhorrent. They're aberrations, sin. It's sin. And so we can't support it. And for that reason, the Christian people must be targeted. They must be abused. They must be rooted out and dealt with accordingly. you know. And this is because Canada has based, our government has based, they based the country on this. They've decided that the theme of Canada and that everything that goes on in Canada will be in furtherance of this theme. And what that is smoking cannabis and oral sodomy. That's basically the Canada in a nutshell. Now, transgenderism, LGBTQ, and drug use. Using lots of drugs. That's Canada now. Yeah. We got a whole society based upon these things. Now, look, if you're a man and you like other men or whatever, yeah, the Bible condemns those sorts of practices. And I do believe in God. So I can't celebrate what you do. But I also don't believe that God has ordered me or asked me or instructed me to persecute you. In fact, I believe He's done the opposite. I believe He's instructed me to love you. Now, that doesn't mean love you in a carnal way, but, and if you're anything like most women, you won't want me doing that anyway. So, probably the gay people aren't going to want me doing that any more than the straight females do. But here's the thing. Just because I don't celebrate the things you do doesn't make me a threat to you. And we got a government now that this is what they're saying. Well, if you don't celebrate these things, then you're automatically a threat to those people. That means that you want to do X, Y, and Z to those people. No, it doesn't. It just means that I can't celebrate certain things. We all have things we can't celebrate. Show of hands, how many people here would be okay with celebrating pedophilia? How many people here would be okay with celebrating serial killing? How many people think we should have a day every year to honor some of our famous serial killers we have here in Canada, like a serial killer, a day of honor for serial killers? We could remember such great serial killers as Clifford Olson. We could have parades in his honor. We could have flags with his picture on them and everything. How many people would be okay with that? We all have things that we can't honor, and I'm not comparing what homosexuals do with each other to serial killing or anything like that. But what I'm saying is, I'm just being dramatic. I'm using extreme examples to make the point that there's always going to be things we can't honor. And unfortunately, got paint on my glasses, do I, or what? I don't know what that was. Anyway, it's gone now, I guess. Anyway, thing is, wonderful. I'll take these off. The thing is, just because we don't honor a certain thing doesn't automatically make us a threat to those people. And in fact, if you're a Christian and you follow Scripture properly, then no, you won't honor homosexual practices. As an example, you won't do that. But you also won't persecute those people. Because if you have a proper understanding of Scripture, you realize you're also not supposed to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, anyway, the government of Canada now, they actually shut down a concert in a church in Montreal that was apparently the singer is an American. He came up here from the United States to perform, and he's a Trump supporter, and he's a Christian. And so apparently he is dangerous and he cannot be allowed to perform in Canada. He has dangerous ideas, you see. We can't have that here. Can't have any dangerous ideas. Who decides what a dangerous idea is? And isn't it kind of a dangerous thing to have bureaucrats or politicians or police deciding who's allowed to think what? I mean, that's kind of tyranny, I think. I think they call that tyranny. In most of the world, that's called tyranny. And unfortunately, most of the world lives under it. And now we're doing the same here. We're living under it. We're gradually losing our right to follow our own conscience, and so on. We're required to follow the crowd. Well, government says and society says and all the rest of it, so we got to follow that. Even if it goes against your conscience, you got to do that. Well, I'm not going to do it. I mean, I may be punished for not doing it, but I'm not going to do it. It's unreal. We got the Tamara Leach and Chris Barber situation going on. We have all this stuff. I was just listening to a bunch of on-the-street interviews with people in Ottawa. And again, this is the crowd that was traumatized by honking horns. I don't know. Like I say, I think these are people who need to have some real problems so that they'll know what a real problem is, because that's not a threat. I'm not saying I'm going to cause them to have those problems. I'm only saying, I'm not advocating that anyone else do that. I'm only saying that I believe these are people who have led sheltered lives, who have had relatively little hardship and relatively little trouble in their lives, and therefore they don't understand what hardship and trouble actually are. And so they think, somebody came to our city and they disobeyed or disagreed or disobeyed the government openly, and that now I'm all hard done by because somebody did that here or whatever. And even when they say this is our city, well, they may live there, but it's the capital city of Canada. So it isn't just their city. Ottawa is the capital of Canada. Just like Washington is the capital of the United States. Now, you may live somewhere other than Washington. You may live in New York City. You may live in Dubuque, Iowa. You may live in Los Angeles, California. You may live in Carmel by the Sea, California. You may live in Spanish Fork, Utah. I don't know. You may live anywhere in the United States. You may live in Binghamton, New York, wherever. It doesn't matter. Washington is your city because that's your capital. That's your seat of government, Washington, city of Washington. So that is your city. Holy smoke, the tan lines from my glasses. Wow. That's pretty weird looking. Looks like I got a mask on. Anyway, that is your city. That's the bottom line. That is your city. And Ottawa is our city, regardless of where you live in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. You could live in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. You could live in Plevna, Ontario. It doesn't matter. Ottawa is your capital city. And where else are you going to protest things the government is doing? You go to the seat of power to protest what the power is doing. Um, if you're a British citizen and you want to protest something going on with the royal family, you go to London, England, because that's where the royal family is based. You know, I mean, like, this is the thing. This is how it's done all over the world. The French people in France, they go to Paris, France, if they want to protest something that's going on with the government. But you go to the seat of power is where you go. That's the bottom line. That's what the truckers did. They went to the seat of power, which happens to be Ottawa. See, all this is common sense. But see, here's the thing, though. Our government has spent the last decade at least, what's gone on longer than that, we've had successive governments that have sabotaged us for 60 years, at least 60 years, maybe longer. That's what we've had. And in the last 10 years, they've really stepped it up. They have. And so what have they done? They've said, well, we're going to base our entire country on drug use and homosexuality. Well, I don't know how to tell you people this, my fellow Canadians, and especially those in charge. And I'm no economist, I admit that. I'm not an economic expert. I'm sitting here in a field beside a camper I'm living in with my cat because I'm not an economic expert. I couldn't even manage my own affairs properly. But even so, I'm just smart enough, and mind you, only just barely, but I'm just smart enough because I have a little bit of common sense to realize that, well, it's one thing to give people or to allow people the freedom to do what they're going to do and to be who they are. There's nothing wrong with offering people the freedom to be who they are. However, you can't base your economy on homosexuality and cannabis. You can't do it. It just doesn't work. And that's what we're finding. It isn't working. Now we have big problems here. And rather than to fix the problems, rather than to do things to bring jobs back here and so on, instead of that, well, we're just going to crush all dissent and we're going to continue down this losing path. We're going to crush anybody who dares to say that it's a losing path, even though we've been on this path and progressively losing for the last 10 years or more. Where we've ramped up the thing, we have to, we have to now promote these agendas, and we now have to make all this stuff a priority. It's like, yeah, you're going to bankrupt yourself. It's like they say, go woke, go broke. That's actually true. That's what happens. You go woke, you go broke. Canada is a good example of that. And actually, the last 4 years under Biden and Harris in the United States were also a good example of that. Because that's what happened there. They did a lot of damage, and they did it on purpose, just like our government is doing it on purpose. I do have some misgivings about Trump. I see some chinks, some cracks, or some chinks in the armor, you could say. And I do have some misgivings about him. I don't think he's handled everything just like he should. I think the optics are bad with some of the stuff he's done and how he's done it. I don't deny that. I still think he's better than the alternative, which would be Harris. But yeah, I can see there's chinks in the armor for sure. He's not perfect, and we can't expect him to be. It wouldn't be reasonable. Now, I think in some regards he should do better than he's doing. That's my personal opinion. But like I say, I'm sure I don't know the whole story behind this Epstein list, but the optics aren't good. I do know that. And he's leaving himself wide open to all kinds of accusations that may or may not be true. Who knows? I don't know. But the thing is, he's leaving himself wide open to it, even if they're not true. It don't look good on him, the way he's handling this thing. And anyway, the bottom line is, though, he didn't destroy Canada. Even if, and he's not destroying Canada, and even if he had the desire to do so, he hasn't been around long enough to do so, at least not in the role that he's in now. And like I say, I've watched successive governments all my life doing things to weaken Canada and to ultimately destroy it. And that was long before Trump ever thought of getting involved in politics. Trump was still gallivanting around New York City, banging porn stars and erecting skyscrapers, when that process started. So, we can't blame him for everything. And even if he is as bad, and again, I'm joking, I don't know if he banged a porn star or not, but I know he did put up some buildings. I know that, but maybe he banged a porn star, who knows? But the thing is, I'm just trying to be a little bit dramatic here to catch people's attention, that's all. But the thing is, he wasn't messing with Canada. Our own government was messing with us back then. So I think if we're going to apportion blame, an awful lot of it has to go to our own system, And we can't really blame Trump for very much. Yes, we can blame him for the tariffs, which are going to hurt us. But we got to bear in mind, we've been tariffing the Americans for decades, already. And we've been carried by the Americans a lot. And I think what Trump is saying is he's focusing on home, and he's focusing on his own people. He's focusing on getting his own house in order. And it's going to take all the resources that are available to do that, And so he can hardly be blamed for that, I mean, the head of a household should look after their own household first. There's nothing wrong with charity. Absolutely nothing. If you have the resources and you want to help out those who don't, that's a good and noble thing. But you got to get your own house in order first, that's all. And in order to have the resources to do that, you got to get your own house in order first. Anyway, that's the bottom line. I'm watching these people on the street, and some of the stuff they're saying is just bizarre. Yeah, not good. But this is what they sincerely believe, Of course, a lot of them are dependent on the federal government for their jobs, just like in Washington, D.C. A lot of people there are dependent on the federal government for their job, So there is that. Anyway, that's it. Rocky and I will see you later. Bye for now.